The fluorescent lights of the subway car flickered like something dying. Outside, a city of 8 million souls drifted through the dark-lit windows, rain-slicked streets. The last trains threading through the black belly of the earth. Slips through the gap in the doors. Moves inside. A woman stands there, forehead pressed to a cold metal pole, her exhausted legs no longer able to carry her own weight. A weary face. Eyes already losing the fight just for a second, she tells herself. Just 1 second, that's the lie. The one we tell ourselves right before the floor disappears beneath us. The train lurches around a corner. Her grip loosens, and then she falls, into space that should have been empty. But it isn't empty. Something warm catches her. A hand settles on her shoulder, and a voice she has never heard before murmurs a single word. The fluorescent lights of the subway car flickered like something dying. Wren Holloway pressed her forehead against the cold metal pole and let it hold the weight her neck couldn't carry anymore. Her feet were screaming. 14 hours of it. Split across the morning diner and the evening hotel rotation, and the bakery still waiting for her tomorrow before the sun came up. $43 and tips. That was the whole take. A whole day of her one and only life, traded for $43 and a late rent notice folded inside her apron pocket. She didn't want to think about the notice, so she didn't. She just swayed there while the train rattled through the dark belly of the city, and she let her vision blur at the edges, and she told herself the lie that every tired person in the world has told themselves at least once, just for a second. Just close your eyes for 1 second. That's the lie. The one you tell right before the floor disappears because she was a widow. 31 years old and already a widow. 3 years now since the accident took Daniel, and 3 years of learning the hard way that grief doesn't pay the electric bill. Grief just sits in the apartment with you, quiet, patient, waiting for the lights to go out so it can have you all to itself. The train lurched around a corner. Her grip loosened. The car swayed hard, and her knees buckled, and instead of catching herself on the pole, she fell backward. Into what should have been empty space, except it wasn't empty. She landed on something solid. Warm. Definitely not a subway seat. Her eyes flew open. She'd collapsed into someone's lap. A man's lap. A stranger's lap at midnight on a train that smelled like rain and old metal. "I'm so sorry," she started. "I didn't." A hand settled on her shoulder. Gentle, firm. The kind of firm that wasn't asking, "Stay," one word. Barely audible over the rattle of the train. But it wrapped around her like something she had no name for, and her body obeyed before her mind could file the complaint. The hand wasn't grabbing. Wasn't groping. It was steadying her, as if the man genuinely believed she might fall again the moment he let go. And the worst part. She tried to turn, to see who she'd collapsed against, but her body was too tired to cooperate, and the exhaustion she'd been outrunning all day finally caught her and dragged her under. "I should," she mumbled. "I need to rest." Closer now, as if he'd leaned down a fraction. She didn't feel his breath on her neck. There was no breath, but she felt the presence of him. Solid. A wall at her back, in a city that had never once offered her a wall to lean on. "You'll hurt yourself. I'm fine." Her eyelids were already losing the fight. Just tired. "I have another shift in, when?" 6 hours, silence. Heavy with something she couldn't name then. Quieter. Sleep. "I'll wake you at your stop." That should have terrified her. A strange man on a midnight train telling her to sleep in his lap. Every alarm bell she owned should have been ringing loud enough to wake the whole car. But Wren was so far past tired that fear had become a luxury. Something for people with savings accounts. Something for people who got to go home and stay home and lock the door behind them, and there was something in his voice. It didn't sound dangerous, it sounded sad. Lonely, even. Like a man who knew exactly what it felt like to be bone-tired in a city that never once stopped moving. Her eyes closed. "Just a minute," she bargained with herself. "Then I'll get up. Apologize properly. Find my dignity wherever it rolled off to." But the warmth beneath her, and the steady weight of that hand, felt safer than her own apartment ever had. The subway rocked her like a cradle, and her last waking thought, drifting down into the dark, was that he smelled like night rain and old libraries. Like something that didn't belong in the ordinary fluorescent world of the midnight train. Then sleep pulled her under. She didn't see it. Didn't see how every other passenger in the car had gone perfectly still. Didn't notice how they'd all found sudden, urgent reasons to stare at their phones, out the windows, at their own shoes, anything, as long as it wasn't him. Because Wren didn't recognize the man whose lap she slept in. They did. His name was Alaric, VA, sovereign of the Eastern Territories. one of the 7 lords who had ruled the night for 300 years. And tonight he sat on a public subway in a black wool coat, looking almost human, almost. If you ignored the absolute stillness of his posture, the way the shadows seemed to pool toward him even under the buzzing lights, the way he did not breathe unless he chose to. He never took the subway. Never moved through the human world without guards and protocol and a careful, cultivated distance. But tonight, for reasons he had not explained to a single living soul, he had dismissed his security and walked out alone, drifted through his own kingdom like a ghost, haunting a house he'd already died in, and now an exhausted human woman slept in his lap. He looked down at her, really looked. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath her eyes. Her hands lay limp, rough with work, the knuckles cracked, the nails bitten down to nothing, a faded name tag pinned crooked to her uniform, Wren. The letters worn soft from too many washes. She smelled like coffee and cleaning chemicals and the particular, specific desperation of a person working herself to death just to stay alive. And something in his chest cracked. Something he had believed turned to stone a very long time ago. Because when was the last time anyone had touched him without fear, without calculation, without wanting something from him in return? This woman had fallen into his arms by pure accident, too tired to register what he was, and now she slept against him, trusting him completely. Not because she knew him, but because her body had finally just stopped caring whether the dark was dangerous. The train slowed for the next stop. He felt her stir, a small sound of distress as the change in motion threatened to wake her. His hand tightened a fraction. "Stay," he murmured, and she settled. Sank deeper, trusting. He told himself he was being practical. If she woke and realized where she was, the shock might cause a scene. Better to let her rest. But the truth sat heavier than that, and he was old enough to know the difference. Because for 3 months now, his daughter had not spoken a single word. 3 months of searching. For something. For someone. A human with true sight, the kind who could see past the surface of a thing and into the truth underneath. His seers had chased reports across the city. The rare ones who perceived emotion as color, as light, as something you could almost reach out and touch. 1 in 10,000 had the gift at all. 1 in a million had it strong enough to matter. And as Wren slept against him, Alaric saw it. The faint shimmer of color clinging to her skin like morning dew. Soft lavender threaded with gold and an exhausted, beautiful gray. She was reading him, even in her sleep. Reading the loneliness and the old grief that hung around him like a second coat. Her gift was strong, maybe strong enough. And for the first time in months, the Night King, who had conquered territories and commanded armies and outlived everyone he had ever loved, felt something other than helpless rage at his daughter's silence. He felt hope. A terrible, fragile thing. He had forgotten how much it hurt. She woke to gentle pressure on her shoulder, and a voice like warm honey poured into the dark. "This is your stop." Her eyes opened slow. Confusion first, the subway. She'd fallen asleep. On someone, she jerked upright, nearly stumbling as the train swayed. Strong hands steadied her, then released her the instant she had her balance back. Like he knew exactly how much touch she could tolerate, and not 1 ounce more. "I'm so sorry," she gasped. Turning, finally, to face the man she'd been using as a pillow, and the apology died in her throat. Because he was beautiful. Not handsome. Beautiful the way winter is beautiful. The way something perfect and dangerous is beautiful right up until the moment it kills you. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair brushing his collar, eyes the color of steel and starlight, but it wasn't his face that stopped her breath. It was the colors. She'd seen emotion as color since she was a little girl. Ribbons of light around people, usually faint, easy to ignore, easy to pretend wasn't there. But this man blazed, deep midnight blue threaded with silver, loneliness so vast it looked like the empty space between stars. And under all of it, 1 thin, desperate filament of gold. Hope, she thought. "He's hoping for something. Don't apologize," he said. Quiet, his voice matched his colors exactly. Beautiful and sad. "You needed the rest." The doors slid open. "This is your stop." He nodded toward it. "Unless I was wrong about the address." Her tired brain tripped over that. "How do you know where your name tag?" "Someone wrote your street on the back." In marker, a pause. "People do that when they're afraid of losing things." She glanced down. And there it was. Her address, scrawled inside the tag months ago, back when she was new and kept forgetting to take it home. She'd forgotten it was even there. Right. Off balance in every way a person can be off balance. "Thank you. For letting me sleep. For keeping you safe." His eyes met hers, and she watched the colors shift. The blue deepened. The gold brightened. You're welcome, she should leave. The doors were already beeping. But something held her there. Are you okay? The question surprised them both. His eyebrows lifted a fraction. Why do you ask? Because you look sad. The words were out before she could stop them. She clapped a hand over her mouth. I'm sorry. That was rude. I don't know why I am sad, he said. Simple. Like she'd asked him about the weather. And you're the first person to notice in a very long time. The doors beeped again, louder, impatient, and Ren did something her exhaustion would later have to answer for. She pulled a pen from her apron, scribbled her number on a napkin, shoved it at him. If you ever, her face went hot, if you ever need someone to talk to, then she fled, through the closing doors. Heart pounding, she did not look back, couldn't bear to see if he was laughing at her, or worse, looking at her with pity. But if she had turned around, she would have seen Alaric Vey staring at that napkin like it was a holy relic. Would have seen the gold thread in his colors flare brighter, stronger. Would have seen him fold the napkin with great care and tuck it into the inner pocket of his coat, right over the place where a heart used to beat. Her apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up, broken elevator, a radiator that clanked like it was trying to send messages to the dead. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed on the second-hand couch, too tired to make it the last 10 feet to the bed. Her phone buzzed. Rent reminder. Electric bill, 3 days out. She should be panicking, calculating shifts. But all she could think about was the sad man on the train, with colors like a midnight ocean, and the way he'd kept her safe while she slept. She fell asleep still in her uniform, and she dreamed of Daniel. She always dreamed of him on the nights she was too tired to keep him out. She'd met Daniel at 20. He fixed transmissions for a living, had grease worked so deep under his nails that no soap ever fully reached it. And he laughed like the whole world was a private joke only he'd been let in on. He'd take her face in both of those rough hands and he'd say, there she is. There's my girl. Like she was something worth finding. Like she'd been lost and he'd gone looking. They had 8 years. 8 good years in a 1-bedroom over a laundromat where the dryers ran all day and the whole place smelled like warm cotton, then a wet road in March. A truck that didn't stop at the light. And a phone call at 2 a.m. that she answered half asleep and didn't understand, made the man repeat, and then understood all at once. The way you understand a floor giving way beneath you. She remembered almost nothing of the funeral, just fragments. The smell of lilies, which she has hated ever since. The weight of a casserole dish someone pressed into her hands, and she never returned because she could never remember whose it was. And the chairs, that was the thing that stayed with her. The rows and rows of folding chairs, set out by a funeral director who'd been optimistic, and how few of them filled. Daniel's people had scattered years ago. Hers were gone or as good as. And the friends came, the first week. They came with food and with hugs and with that particular look, the one that says I'm so sorry and also, underneath, please get better soon. This is hard to be around. Then the second week came, and fewer of them. And the third, fewer still, because grief has a shelf life in other people. There's a window where the world will hold you, and the window closes, and it closes faster than anyone tells you. By the second month, she was answering, how are you doing with better? Thanks. Because that was the answer that let people off the hook. And she watched them take it, watched the relief go across their faces, and learned to stop telling the truth. That was the beginning of the disappearing. Because here is the thing nobody warns you about, becoming a widow young. It isn't the grief. She could carry the grief. She got strong carrying it, the way you get strong carrying anything heavy long enough. No. It's the way the world quietly closes over the empty space where a marriage used to be. The way a couple's friends become, very gradually, not yours. The way the invitations thin. The way you become, at 30, the sad one. The one people are kind to and then relieved to leave. She took a second job, then a third. Partly for the money. The money was real, the money never stopped being real. But partly because an empty apartment at night was a thing she could not bear, and a double shift was a thing she could. Work didn't ask how she was doing. Work just asked her to carry plates, and she could always carry plates. And somewhere in those 3 years, she stopped being a person other people saw. She'd stand at a bus stop, or a checkout line, or the back of a church on the rare Sunday she went, and she'd feel herself going faint at the edges, lighter and lighter, like a photograph left too long in the sun, until she was half convinced that one ordinary morning she'd simply blow away on the wind, and not one single soul in all that enormous city would notice the weather had changed. That was the woman who got on the midnight train. A woman the world had stopped looking at, and then a stranger had looked at her. Really looked, and said one word and meant it, and held on so she wouldn't fall. She turned that word over in the dark a long, long time before sleep finally took her under again. Stay. For the first time in 3 years, somebody had told her not to disappear. And some small, stubborn, half-drowned part of her, the part Daniel used to call my girl, had heard it, and woken up, and decided it wanted to live after all. 3 days later, her phone rang. "Unknown number, yes?" she answered, wedging the phone against her shoulder, scrubbing down a diner table. "Is this Wren Holloway?" She dropped the rag, that voice. "The subway stranger, yes?" "You gave me your number." She could hear something almost like amusement in it. 3 days ago, right. Obviously, her face went up in flames. "I didn't actually think you'd call. I need to ask you something." "It's going to sound strange," she laughed. "Couldn't help it. Stranger than falling asleep on a random man on the subway?" A pause. "Yes, much stranger than that," so she listened, the rag forgotten in her hand, while a stranger told her that his daughter had stopped speaking 3 months ago, that she was 6 years old, that every therapist, every specialist, every expert money could buy had tried and failed. "You see emotion," he said, "as color, don't you?" Her hand tightened on the phone. "How do you know about that? I saw it. When you looked at me on the train, the colors around me shifted in your eyes. Not everyone," she corrected. "Automatic. Most people are too faint to read. But you..." She stopped. "I blazed," he finished. "Soft, didn't I?" "Yes." "I think my daughter needs someone who can see her. Really see what she's feeling, when she can't find the words for it herself. I think you might be the only person alive who can." Her shift manager was glaring at her from across the diner. "This is crazy," she said. "I don't know you. I don't know the first thing about helping a traumatized child I could teach you. And I would pay you $5,000 a week." She nearly dropped the phone a second time. "What? 10,000. If you move into the house? So you're there when she needs you. That's insane." "Yes," he agreed. "Calm. It probably is. Will you consider it anyway?" She should say no. Hang up. Block the number. Forget all about mysterious sad men who offered impossible money over the phone. But 10,000 a week was rent. Was the electric bill. Was the cracked tooth she'd been ignoring for 8 months because the dentist wanted $400 she didn't have. Was, maybe, finally, the first time in 3 years she might come up for air. "What's your name?" she asked. "Alaric." "Alaric Faye. Where do you live?" He gave her an address in the historic district. Old money. The kind of neighborhood she only ever saw the inside of when she was cleaning somebody else's house. "When can I meet her?" "Tomorrow," she heard herself say. "I have the day off. Tomorrow, then." A pause and, "Wren, thank you for giving a sad stranger your number." He hung up before she could answer. She stared at the address scrawled on her order pad. And the colors around her own reflection in the diner window swirled with fear and hope and something dangerously close to wanting. The Vey house was not a house. It was a mansion lifted straight out of a Gothic novel. Dark stone, tall windows like watching eyes. Iron gates that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. She stood outside them at exactly 2 o'clock, in her only nice dress, fighting the urge to turn and run all the way back to the train. A woman appeared at the gate so suddenly that Wren jumped. Pale skin, dark suit, eyes that took her apart in one cold, efficient glance. "You're the synesthete." Not a question. Wren nodded. The woman unlocked the gate with a key that belonged in a museum. "I'm Marin, head of the household." He's waiting in the east parlor. Inside, the house was beautiful in a way that made Wren feel like a trespasser. Marble floors, oil paintings in heavy frames, a chandelier that scattered light like loose diamonds across the ceiling. Everything in it whispered old money and older secrets. Marin led her down a hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. Stopped at a carved door, knocked twice, disappeared inside. Through the wood, Wren heard low voices. Then his "show her in," the door opened. She stepped through and stopped breathing. The parlor was full of people. A dozen at least. All dressed formally, all turning to stare at her. Expressions ranging from cool curiosity to open hostility, but she barely saw their faces. Because the colors. Every single person in that room blazed with emotion so bright it was like staring into the sun. Reds and golds and deep, bruised purples, jealousy, suspicion, fear, all of it swirling together into a storm that made her eyes water. She had never seen so many people burning so hot at once. "What are they?" Then he was there. Alaric, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. He'd crossed the room in an instant, faster than a person should be able to move, Wren. "Look at me," she did. His colors were still the midnight blue and silver she remembered. but now there was a warm amber threading through them. Concern, breathe. I should have warned you. What are they? She whispered. He didn't look away. Vampires. We're all vampires. And you're standing in a room full of my court. Trying very hard not to faint, the world tilted. His grip kept her on her feet. Vampires. Real vampires. She should run, should scream. But through the shock, one thought cut clean. His colors hadn't lied. Sadness, loneliness, hope, every one of them. Real. Whatever he was, whatever any of them were, his feelings were genuine. And in 3 years of grief, in a city full of people who looked right through her, genuine was something she'd very nearly forgotten existed. I need to sit down, she managed. He guided her to a chair, waved off the others when they pressed closer. She needs a moment. Give us the room, and the room emptied. Fast, though she caught the whispers as they filed past her. A human. He brought a human here. Is he out of his mind? When the last one was gone, Alaric knelt in front of her chair, bringing his eyes level with hers. And now she could see the inhuman stillness of him. The way he didn't quite breathe like a living thing does. I'm sorry. I should have told you before you came. Why didn't you? Because you wouldn't have believed me. Or you would have. And you'd never have come near my daughter. He was right. And they both knew it, your daughter, she said. Is she half human? Her mother was human, was? She died. 3 months ago, a pause that cost him something. That's when our girl stopped speaking. After the funeral, Ren lowered her hands and looked at him, really looked, and the colors around him shifted as she watched. Pain, old and deep. Guilt, sharp underneath it. And beneath all of it, anchoring the whole churning storm, the desperate, helpless love of a father for a child who couldn't tell him what she needed. You really think I can help her? I think you're the only one who can see what she's feeling. The therapists try. But they work blind. You could see if she's afraid, or angry, or grieving. You could help her speak when the words won't come. That's a lot to put on a waitress with a strange condition, I know. His hand moved, almost touched hers. Stopped. I'm asking anyway, because I am out of options, and my daughter is disappearing into a silence I cannot reach. And I would give anything in this world to bring her back. The gold in his colors flared. True desperation. True love. She took a breath. I want to meet her first. Before I decide anything, relief broke across his face. Turned his colors bright for half a second. Of course, she's upstairs. Follow me. He led her up a grand staircase. Down a corridor lined with portraits of severe-looking people, who all shared his sharp features. The playroom waited at the very end. Behind a door painted soft blue, he knocked. Gentle. Posey? There's someone I'd like you to meet. No answer. He opened the door anyway. The room was large, bright, full of expensive toys that looked like no child had ever once touched them. And in the corner, curled into a window seat, with a book she wasn't reading, was the smallest child Ren had ever seen. Posey Vey was tiny for 6. Her father's dark hair, and eyes far too old for her face. She wore a purple dress and white tights, and she did not look up when they entered. But Ren saw her colors, and the breath left her body, because Posey's colors were like nothing she had ever seen. They shifted constantly, spinning through the whole spectrum so fast it was dizzying. Fear and confusion and grief and rage and love, all tangled into a knot so tight, so impossibly complicated, that Ren couldn't find where one feeling ended and the next began. This child wasn't quiet. This child was drowning. In feelings she had no way on earth to speak. Oh, Ren whispered. Before she could stop herself, the little girl's head lifted, just slightly. Ren moved slow, knelt down, kept her distance. She pulled a pen and a scrap of paper from her purse, the same kind of pen she'd used to write her number on that napkin, and she wrote, large and clear, "Can you see colors around people?" She held it up. Posey stared at the words, her own colors spiking red. Fear, Ren wrote again. I see them around you right now. You're feeling a lot of things all at once, aren't you? The girl's dark eyes lifted, met hers, for the first time, and Ren wrote one more line. I see you, all of you, and I'm going to help you show your dad what you need. The colors around Posey shifted. The red faded, and a soft, fragile blue bloomed in its place. Hesitant, trembling. Hope, the little girl uncurled from the window seat, took 3 careful steps across the floor, and placed her small hand in the palm of Ren's open hand. Behind them, Alaric made a sound. Low. Broken. When Ren glanced back, his colors were blazing, so bright it hurt to look at him. 3 months, he said, his voice not quite steady. That's the first time she's chosen to touch anyone in 3 months, and Ren. Kneeling there on the floor of a vampire's mansion, holding the hand of a silent little girl, felt something she hadn't felt since long before Daniel died. She felt necessary. She didn't sleep that night either. But this time it was for a different reason, because she lay in her own bed, in her own small apartment, with the broken elevator and the clanking radiator, and she did the math. The way she always did the math. 3 jobs, late rent, the cracked tooth, the cold arithmetic of which Bill could wait another month without the lights going out. But it wasn't the math that kept her awake. It was the hand. That small, careful hand that had crossed a playroom floor and chosen hers. After 3 months of choosing no one, she thought about that little girl, drowning in colors she couldn't speak. And she thought about how it felt God, how she knew exactly how it felt to be full of something enormous and have no one in the world able to see it. That was the thing that decided her. Not the money, though the money mattered. The money was survival, but the child was something else. The child was a mirror. She made the call at 6 in the morning. "I'll do it," she said. "I'm moving in." A pause on the line, and then his voice, careful, like a man afraid to believe good news. "Thank you, Ren." "Don't thank me yet. I'm probably going to be terrible at this." "You won't be," he said. "You already weren't." She moved into the Vey mansion on a rainy Tuesday. One suitcase and a growing sense that her life had slipped sideways into somebody else's story. The house ran on rules she kept tripping over, like the fact that nobody ate breakfast. Because of course they didn't. She'd come down that first morning, bleary-eyed, expecting eggs, and found the vast kitchen empty except for Marin, polishing something that was already clean. "There's no coffee," Ren said. Tragic. Genuinely tragic. Marin looked at her the way you'd look at an exotic and slightly tedious pet. "We don't drink coffee, right? Of course. The blood thing." Ren rubbed her face. "Is there okay? This is going to sound insane. Is there a grocery store? Or do I need to file a request with the king?" A muscle moved in Marin's jaw. It might have been the ghost of a smile. It might have been indigestion. The next morning there was coffee, a whole machine, beans from somewhere expensive, and a note in handwriting 300 years old, for the human who cannot function. A Ren laughed out loud in the empty kitchen, and that became its own quiet language between them. The coffee machine. The book he left on her nightstand when she mentioned once that she missed reading. The way he learned, without being told, that she took her eggs scrambled hard and her toast nearly burnt, and arranged for them to appear, even though no one in that house had eaten breakfast in a century. He was a king who had commanded armies, and he was learning clumsily, beautifully, how to take care of one tired human woman. She noticed. She noticed everything. It was, after all, the one thing she'd always been good at. "You don't have to do all this," she told him. "I know," he said. "Then why?" He considered it, like the question deserved a serious answer. "Because for 300 years, everyone in my life has needed something from me. Protection, favor, permission to exist. You're the first person who fell into my lap literally and wanted nothing at all." A pause. "It turns out I rather like having someone to take care of." I'd forgotten. She didn't have an answer for that, so she drank her coffee and tried to ignore the way her own colors had gone warm at the edges. The drawings became their language. Every afternoon, the same ritual. The playroom flooded with the gold light of late October. A low table, 2 chairs, one of them comically small, and between them, a fat stack of paper and a coffee can crammed full of broken crayons. Ren learned the grammar of it slowly. Black meant her mother. Always. The hard scribble across the golden-haired woman's face. The mark a child makes when the thing she's drawing is too big to look at directly. Gray meant the funeral. The day she'd stood in a room full of grown-ups and felt herself vanish. And red. Red was the one that frightened Ren most. Because red wasn't sadness. Red was rage. A 6-year-old's fury at a world that had taken the one person who'd seen her, and no language to put it in. So it came out in pictures. A house on fire, a black sky. A small figure standing alone in the middle of it all, mouth open, no sound coming out. "You're angry," Ren said one afternoon, tapping the red. "It's allowed. You can be angry and sad at the very same time. They can live in the same place." Posey stared at her, then slowly drew a new picture. 2 figures this time. One small, one taller with brown hair and a coffee can of crayons, holding hands. And around them both, for the first time, no black. No gray, no red, just a careful, hopeful blue. Ren had to leave the room to cry, where the child couldn't see her. Some days were good. Posey would point at a feeling and Ren would name it, and the naming would loosen something, like a knot working itself free. Other days were terrible. The girl would curl into the window seat and refuse the crayons and stare at the rain, and Ren would just sit with her, not speaking. Not pushing. Just being a body in the room that saw her, so she didn't have to be alone with all of it. "You can't rush grief," she told Alaric one night when he asked. too eagerly, whether the girl was getting better. You can only keep her company while it does what it does. That's all anybody ever did for me. Sat with me. It was the only thing that worked. Who sat with you? He asked, and she realized with a small cold shock that she didn't have an answer. Nobody, she said finally. I did it alone. He looked at her a long time, his colors shifting. Something tender moving through the blue. Then you learn to give a thing no one ever gave you, he said. That's the rarest kind of person there is. That evening, she showed him the drawings. He stared at them a long time, his colors cycling through pain and guilt. I didn't know. At the funeral, she seemed so calm. I thought she was handling it better than I was. She was 6, Ren said. Gentle. She didn't know how to show you what she felt. So she stopped showing anything at all. His hands closed slowly on the table edge. I failed her. You didn't know. You were grieving too. I should have seen it. You're seeing it now? She touched his hand. Brief. That's what matters. She's coming back. Slow. But she's coming back to you. But the morning it finally happened. There was no warning at all. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Rain on the windows, the coffee can of crayons between them. Ren had drawn a simple thing, a sun, badly, because she'd never been able to draw, and slid it across the table, and asked, the way she always asked, not expecting anything, what color is today, sweetheart? And Posey picked up a crayon, yellow, and she colored the sun, and then, in a voice so small and so rusty, it was barely a sound at all. A voice like a door that hasn't been opened in 100 years, the little girl said, yellow. Ren went absolutely still. Because she knew the way you know not to startle a bird that's landed close, that if she moved too fast, if she made too much of it, the door would slam shut and might not open again for another 3 months. So she did the hardest thing she had ever done. She kept her voice flat, easy, like nothing in the world had just happened. Yellow, she agreed. Yeah, I think today's yellow too. And Posey looked up at her, those old eyes in that small face, checking, testing, making sure the word had been safe to let out, making sure the sky hadn't fallen. It hadn't, so she said another one. Rainy, she whispered, and pointed at the window. It is rainy, Ren said, her own throat closing. Good rainy or bad rainy? Posey considered this with enormous 6-year-old seriousness. Good rainy, she decided. Inside rainy, and that was it. 2 words and then a few more, the dam not breaking but cracking, a thin, clean trickle of a thing that had been held back too long. Inside rainy, safe and warm rainy, the rain you only love when you're not out in it. Ren did not call for Alaric. Every instinct in her wanted to run down the hall screaming the news, but she didn't, because this fragile new thing belonged to Posey, and Posey would decide who got to hear it. So instead, she just kept coloring, kept the room ordinary. Let the little girl try the words on, one at a time, in the safest place she had. It was Posey who decided. An hour later, when Alaric appeared in the doorway, he found reasons to pass that door a dozen times a day. Ren had noticed. Just to glance in, the little girl looked up from her drawing, and she looked at her father. The father she'd been afraid of those first weeks. The father whose grief was so big it had frightened her into silence, and she said, Daddy, just that. One word. The first word she had spoken to him since the funeral. Ren watched a 300-year-old king come apart in a doorway. He crossed the room slowly, the way you approach something holy. And he went down onto his knees in front of the little table, bringing himself small, bringing himself level with her. His hands were shaking. A man who could put his fists through stone, and his hands were shaking. I'm here, he said, barely able to get it out. I'm right here, my love. I hear you. And Posey reached out one small hand and put it flat against his cheek, the way children do, with no idea of the weight of it. And his colors, Ren would remember this until the day she died. His colors went the gold of a sunrise after the longest night there ever was. I missed you, Daddy, Posey said. He couldn't answer. He just gathered her up against his chest and held her and made no sound at all. And over the top of his daughter's dark head, he found Ren's eyes across the room, and what was in his colors then had no name she knew. It was bigger than gratitude. It was the look of a drowning man who has just felt the bottom under his feet. Ren slipped out of the room and closed the door softly behind her and stood in the hallway and cried like she hadn't cried in 3 years. Not from sadness, from the other thing, the thing that has no good word in English. The opposite of grief. The feeling of having put something broken back together with your own 2 hands. The piece did not last. It cracked on a cold November night. Ren woke to screaming. She ran, down the hall, toward the sound, burst into Posey's room to find the little girl sitting up in bed, shrieking, wordless. Her colors a violent tornado of red and black and sick, curdled green terror. Pure terror, Alaric was already there, reaching for her, but his touch only made her scream louder. She's afraid of you, Ren realized. Watching the colors spike whenever he came close, something scared her, and now she's scared of everything. He stepped back. Anguish carved deep into his face. Ren approached the bed. Slow, Posy. Sweetheart? I'm here. Can you show me what's wrong? The screaming cut off, and the little girl launched herself across the bed, small arms locking around Ren's neck, her heart slamming like a trapped bird. What frightened you? Ren murmured. But Posy was looking past her. At the window, Ren turned. Saw nothing, just darkness, and rain on the glass, then lightning split the sky, and in that white flash, a face, pressed against the window. Pale, fangs bared, eyes glowing a wet, terrible red. Ren's scream tore loose to join the child's. Alaric moved faster than thought. He was at the window, wrenching it open, gone into the storm. There were sounds of a struggle outside. Crashes. An inhuman shriek cut suddenly, sickeningly short. Then silence. Ren held Posy tighter, both of them shaking. Don't look outside. Keep your eyes on me. Alaric came back through the window, rain dripping from his hair, blood on his collar that was not his own, and his colors were pure, churning rage, gone. It won't come back. Who was that? Ren demanded. What was that? He looked at his daughter, then at her. Not here, not in front of her, later. After Posy had finally fallen asleep between them, curled small and safe, after the first gray light began to touch the windows. He told her the truth. There are vampires who don't follow my rules, who think humans are prey. Not people. They don't like that I've brought you into this house, that I treat you as family. They want to make a statement by hurting Posy, by hurting you. His colors went dark. I won't allow it. I'll double the guard. You'll have protection. But Ren was already shaking her head. Maybe I should go. If me being here puts her in danger, you being here keeps her alive. Fierce. Sudden. You've brought her back from a silence I couldn't reach. If you leave now, she breaks. And so do I. His hand found hers in the gray light. Please, don't go. She looked at the child, sleeping peacefully now, her colors finally calm. She looked at the man, whose colors showed nothing but desperate, naked sincerity. Okay, she said. I'll stay. But you teach me to defend myself. If someone comes for me, I'm not going down easy. Something shifted in his face. Respect threading through the relief. Done. A breath. And Ren, I'll keep you safe. I give you my word. His colors blazed gold. Truth, she believed him. Training to defend yourself against a vampire, Ren discovered, was significantly harder than training to defend yourself against a man, especially when your instructor could move faster than you could blink, and had the strength to put his fist through stone, and kept looking at you like you were the most fragile thing he'd ever been afraid to break. You're dead, Alaric said. I'm aware, again. I'm aware of that too. She hit the mat for what felt like the 1,000th time. Tasted dust. Lay there a moment, contemplating the ceiling, the universe, and the specific chain of life choices that had led her to be repeatedly knocked flat by an immortal in a basement. You know, she said to the ceiling, most people my age are doing yoga. Most people your age can't see the future in a man's colors. That's not a real superpower, if I'm always face down on the floor when it happens. He offered her a hand. She took it. He pulled her up like she weighed nothing, which to him, she very nearly did. Stop trying to be fast, he said. You'll never be fast. You're a 31-year-old waitress with a wooden stick. Speed is a battle they will always win. Wow, the pep talks. Really, frame them, listen. His hand was still on her arm. Steadying. You have one advantage. Exactly one. You see them coming before they move. So stop fighting like a vampire. Fight like the only person in the room who already knows how the fight ends. And something in that clicked. She stopped lunging. Stopped trying to match his speed. Instead, she went still, watched, waited. Read the silver flicker in his colors that came a half-second before each strike. And when it came, she was already moving. Not fast, just early. The wooden stake touched his chest. He froze, then looked down, then up, and something crossed his face that she had never seen there before. Surprise. Real, undefended surprise. That, he said quietly, is the closest anything has come to my heart in 200 years. Even with a stick, she should have made a joke. She had 3 of them lined up. But the way he was looking at her drove every single one clean out of her head. We should keep going, she said. Too fast. We should, he agreed. Not moving. Neither of them kept going. The stake stayed pressed there, over the place where a heart used to beat. And for one long, dangerous moment, the basement was very quiet, and very warm, and full of 2 people pretending very hard that they didn't know exactly what was happening between them. This is complicated, she finally said. Very. he agreed. But he didn't step back. The door opened. Marin stood there, her colors carved from ice. Your Majesty, the council has arrived. They demand an audience in the main hall. With representatives from the old families, Alaric's colors snapped cold. He swore under his breath, soft, ancient, a word in a language that hadn't been spoken aloud in centuries. Stay here, he told Ren. This doesn't concern you, but Marin's colors spiked the instant he said it. Red. Hostile, which told Ren it concerned her a great deal. That night, neither of them could sleep. So they ended up in the small dining room, at one corner of that absurd 50-seat table, with a bottle of wine he'd opened that she was fairly sure predated the country they were sitting in. You don't actually need this, she said, swirling the dark red in her glass. Wine, food, the breakfast you keep having made for me? No, he admitted. We don't need any of it, so why a wine cellar? Why a kitchen? He turned his own glass slowly in his long fingers, watching the light move through it. Because the alternative is to stop pretending to be alive, he said. And once you stop pretending, it's a very short road to forgetting how. I've watched it happen. Old ones who give up the rituals. The meals they don't need, the clothes they don't need, the sleep they don't need. They let it all go, one comfort at a time. And the longer they live, the less human they become. Until one day there's nothing left in there but appetite and habit and 300 years of cold. He looked up at her. I have been very afraid, for a very long time, of becoming that. She didn't say anything. She'd learned that with him, silence was an invitation. He'd spent 3 centuries with people who filled every quiet with flattery. The quiet was the gift she could give that no one else had thought to. Do you want to know the truth about immortality? He asked. The thing none of the stories tell you? Tell me, it isn't the dying you watch, though you do watch it, everyone. Over and over, he set the glass down. It's the forgetting. You forget their voices first. That's the cruelest part. You'd think it would be the faces, but it's the voices. I had a brother once, 200 years dead, and I cannot for the life of me remember the sound of his laugh. I know that he laughed. I know that I loved it. But the sound itself is gone, worn smooth, like a coin handled too many times. His jaw tightened. You spend the first century afraid of losing the people, and the rest of eternity afraid of losing the parts of yourself that knew how to love them. That's why you kept the napkin, she said, quietly. Isn't it? His eyes came up to hers, sharp. How did you touch your coat pocket when you don't know you're doing it? Right here, she pressed 2 fingers to the place over her own heart. I noticed the first week. I notice things. It's the one thing I'm good at. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into his coat, that same black wool coat, and drew it out. The napkin. Her diner's cheap logo in the corner. Her number in her own tired handwriting. Soft now, from being folded and unfolded more times than she wanted to think about. 300 years, he said. And the night you wrote this is the first time in longer than I can remember that a stranger offered me something and wanted nothing back. He folded it again with that same impossible care and put it away. You asked me once why I take care of you. That's the answer. You handed me a piece of paper on a train and reminded me I was still in there. Still capable of being reached. A pause. I'd stopped believing that, and then you fell asleep on me. She had no joke for that. The jokes had stopped coming, around this man, weeks ago. She just reached across the corner of the enormous table and put her small, warm, mortal hand over his cold one. And they sat there. 2 lonely people in an empty house. Not pretending, not performing. Just being reached. This is complicated, she said. The 3rd time she'd said it to him. I know, he said. I find I've stopped minding. The council met in a room built for intimidation. High ceilings lost to shadow. Tapestries dark with age. A circular table of black wood. 12 vampires in 12 ornate chairs. And 1 larger seat at the head. Alaric took it. Ren did not stay in the basement. She slipped in through a side door instead. Pressed herself into the shadows along the wall. She'd learned a few things by now. That vampire hearing was extraordinary. But that their eyes in a brightly lit room were sometimes worse than a human's, and this room blazed with chandelier light, so she watched. A vampire with silver hair spoke first, his colors the color of dried blood. Old hatred, gone brittle, Alaric. We need to discuss your human. The way he said it. Like the word itself was something he'd scraped off the bottom of his shoe. Lord Bardane. Alaric's voice could have frozen a river. If you have a concern. State it plainly, you brought a mortal into this house. Gave her access to the air. Let her shape the child. It's unprecedented. It's dangerous, another added. Younger. Colors swirling between envy and ambition. She's helping my daughter speak. That is all that matters. It sends a message. the younger one again. That humans are equals, that they belong in our world. They don't, my world, Alaric said, soft, and somehow that softness was the most frightening sound in the room. And in my world, anyone who helps my daughter is welcome. The room erupted, voices stacking over voices, accusations flying like thrown knives. Humans are food, not family. You make us look weak. The old laws forbid this, and Ren. In the shadows watched the colors spiral into chaos, anger, fear, contempt. All of it aimed at the man at the head of the table, at the man who had kept her safe on a train when he didn't have to. Then she saw it. In the far corner, a vampire she didn't recognize. And his colors were wrong, not the emotional palette she was used to, not feeling. Something else. Something that didn't belong on a living thing or a dead one. Dark purple, threaded through with a sick, luminous green. And those colors weren't sitting still inside him. They were reaching, stretching across the room, toward Alaric, like vines, like poison poured into water magic. Someone was working magic on the king. Ren moved before her brain caught up to her feet, stepped out of the shadows. Excuse me? The room went dead silent. 12 immortal faces turned to stare, and Alaric's expression broke open between fury and fear. Ren. I told you to stay, I know, her heart a fist against her ribs. But someone in this room is using magic on you. She pointed, straight the corner. Him, there's a spell, aimed right at you. The stranger's colors flared, panic, guilt. Naked, ugly guilt. And he bolted, he didn't make it 2 steps. Because Alaric was on him, moving with a violence Ren had never seen, not in training, not anywhere. He slammed the vampire into the wall hard enough to crack the stone. Dust drifting down through the chandelier light. What did you do? The vampire thrashed. Nothing. The girl is lying. She's a human. What would she know of? Ren walked closer, and the magic was clearer now. Dark threads running from the vampire's body to something tucked in his coat. An object. Small. He has a charm. Left pocket? Alaric reached in, pulled out a stone, etched with symbols that seemed to writhe when she looked at them too long. And the instant it left the vampire's pocket, the dark colors in the room dissolved. Like smoke pulled out a window. The council members blinked, confused, as if waking from a dream. Several touched their own foreheads, frowning, like men trying to recall something that had already slipped away. What just happened? Said the woman beside Lord Bardane. Lady Crow, sharp-faced, old. I was so angry. I don't even know why, Ewer Spelton said. All of you. The charm made you angrier, more suspicious. Someone wanted this meeting to end in blood. The rooms exploded again, but this time the rage had a new direction. The vampire pinned against the wall. Who gave you this? Alaric demanded. Who ordered you to spell my counsel? The vampire stayed silent. Alaric's hand drifted to his throat. Talk, or I'll show you why challenging a king is unwise. And the vampire's colors broke, fear overriding loyalty, the way fear always does, in the end. The purebloods, they paid me, said you'd gone soft, said the human was making you weak, said you needed to be removed before the rot spread. Alaric threw him toward the guards at the door. The cells. We'll continue this later. They dragged him out, and the king turned to face his council, his colors no longer cold rage. Now they were pure authority, gold and deep, deep blue, absolute command. Let me be clear, he said, and the room held its breath. Ren Holloway is under my protection. She is healing my daughter. Anyone who threatens her, threatens Posey. And anyone who threatens my child answers to me. Personally, the council nodded, subdued, their colors showing fear, and something Ren hadn't expected. Respect Lady Crow stood last. She studied Ren across the long room. A look that went on too long. You saw the spell, when none of us could. When the air itself was bending around us and we felt nothing. A pause. A synesthete sees emotion. You saw magic. That is not the same thing. That is rarer than you understand. Far rarer. And then the old woman left. Before Ren could ask what on earth that was supposed to mean, Alaric found her in the hallway after. His hand found hers, without asking, as if it had simply decided on its own. You shouldn't have come in. You shouldn't have had to do that. I'm sorry you were exposed to them. I'm not. She squeezed his fingers. If I'm staying, I should know what we're up against. We. The words seemed to catch him off guard. His colors warmed. We. So what are we up against? A faction. They call themselves the purebloods. They want the old ways back. Humans as cattle. Never people. They've been quiet for decades. But bringing you into my house, treating you as family, his jaw tightened. It stirred them up. How many? Enough to be dangerous. He looked tired suddenly. Centuries old and suddenly tired. I can fight them. But it may get ugly before it's done. He was right. In the weeks that followed, the threats grew teeth. It started with the donors. 3 of them vanished. Humans who came willingly, paid well, screened twice over, and then simply gone, one after another, like someone was pulling threads to see what would unravel. Then a letter slid under the front gate in the dead of night. No envelope, just a single sheet of heavy paper, and on it, in elegant, ancient script, "The king keeps a pet. Pets get put down." Alaric burned it in front of her, his hand steady, his colors anything but. "They're testing the walls," he said. "Finding the weak points. This is how their leader works. He doesn't charge. He erodes. He'll take everything around you first. Make you small. Make you afraid. And only then, when you've got nothing left to lose, will he come to the door." "Then we don't get small," Ren said. "And we don't get afraid. Both of those are easier said than felt." "I know." She looked at the ashes of the letter. "I've been afraid for 3 years. Afraid of the rent. Afraid of dying alone in a city that never noticed I was there." She lifted her chin. "Turns out fear's just a room you can decide to walk out of. I walked out of mine the night I fell into your lap. I'm not walking back in for some coward who writes notes in the dark." He looked at her like she'd said something extraordinary. Which, to him, maybe she had. "You realize," he said slowly, "that you're braver than half my court, who have lived 300 years and bled in a dozen wars. They've got forever to lose. I've got maybe 50 good years if I'm lucky." She shrugged. "Makes you spend them differently, less carefully. Maybe that's the one thing being mortal's good for." And Alaric, who had spent 3 centuries being careful with an immortality that had brought him nothing but grief, looked at the small, fierce human woman in front of him and understood something that rearranged him from the inside out. That she was right. That all his caution had only ever cost him. "When this is over," he said, "I want to spend mine the way you spend yours. Recklessly, gladly. However long it lasts." "That's the most romantic thing anyone said to me in a basement after a death threat," she said, but her colors had gone gold, and he saw it. And he smiled. That same week, the last piece fell into place. And it came from Marin, of all people. It started small. Posy in the playroom, drawing her mother for the 100th time. And then, in a voice rusty and small as an unused hinge, the little girl said, "Mama knew." Ren went still. "Knew what, sweetheart?" The girl pointed at Ren, then at her own eyes, then made a slow, sweeping gesture in the air, tracing colors only the 2 of them could see. "Mama said a lady would come." "Who sees the colors?" Her small finger touched Ren's wrist. "She said you would find us." The pencil slipped from Ren's hand. That night she went to Marin. Found the head of household in the kitchen, polishing silver that did not need polishing. Posy said her mother knew I was coming. Marin, what did she mean? For a long moment the old woman said nothing, just turned the spoon in her hands, round and round. Like she was deciding how much truth a human could carry. The lady of this house was no ordinary woman, Adeline. She had a touch of the sight herself, faint, nothing like yours. But enough. She set the spoon down. In her last weeks, the fever took her clear. She spoke of things that hadn't happened yet. And one night she gripped my hand and she said, "When I'm gone, the silence will come for our girl. And only the woman who sees in color will be able to call her back." A breath. She made me promise to watch the train lines, the late ones, the ones the tired ride. "That's where the colors will cross," she said. Ren's skin went cold. The subway. He dismissed his guards that night. He told no one why. He couldn't have explained it if he tried. He said only that something pulled him onto a train he'd never once ridden in 300 years. Marin's eyes, for once, were not cold at all. "Some doors are opened for us, child. Long before we ever walk through them." Ren thought of falling backward into a lap that should have been empty. Of a hand on her shoulder. A single word. Stay. It wasn't an accident. A dying woman had reached 3 years into the future and sent her daughter the one person who could save her. And then she'd let go. Ren lay awake a long time that night. She thought she should be frightened. Instead, for the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She was wrong about one thing, though. She thought the worst was behind them. It wasn't. It was standing in the dark at the edge of the property, watching the lit windows with eyes that had seen 3 centuries come and go. And it had a name. Silas Dunmore. And it had loved a human woman once, a very long time ago. The purebloods made their move on the longest night of the year. It began small. A gardener found dead at the gate, drained, a warning left in the frost. Then the perimeter guards going silent, one by one, like candles pinched out in a long hall. Alaric felt it before the alarm sounded. He was on his feet between one breath and the next. Ren was halfway out of her chair before she understood why. "Get Posy," he said. And his voice was not the voice of the man who'd let her sleep on his shoulder. It was the voice of the thing the old families feared. Get her to the safe room now. But there wasn't time. Because they were already inside, the lights died across the entire mansion at once. Every chandelier, every lamp, plunging 3 centuries of marble and shadow into perfect dark, and in that dark Ren heard them moving. Fast. Many. The whisper of bodies that made no sound a human was ever meant to hear. She grabbed Posey, pressed the little girl's face into her shoulder. Don't look. Whatever happens. Keep your eyes shut and hold on to me. And then the doors blew open. 20 of them flooded into the great hall, dressed in black, moving like spilled ink, their colors all the same poisoned shade. Conviction. Fanatical and bright and absolutely certain. The colors of people who believe their own cruelty is mercy. And at their head, a man silver pale, tall, with a stillness even deeper than Alaric's. His colors weren't the hot red of the others. His were strange. Old grief layered so thick over so many years that it had hardened into something else entirely, into stone, into a wall a man builds around a wound so it can never be touched again. Alaric Vey, his voice almost gentle, almost sorrowful, step down and hand me the human. I'll make her end quick. I'm not a cruel man, whatever they've told you, Silas. Alaric moved to stand between the invaders and the 2 figures behind him. You shouldn't have come here. I had to. His eyes drifted to Ren, to the small girl hidden against her, and something flickered in his colors. Pain. A thread of something almost like regret. You've broken the oldest law we have. You've let a mortal into your heart. I'm here to save you from what comes next. I don't need saving, you do. And now the grief in Silas swelled, filled the whole room. So heavy that even Ren, across the hall, felt the weight of it press against her chest. I loved one of them once. The hall went still, 300 years ago. Before the laws. Her name doesn't matter now. No one remembers it but me. I loved her, and I watched her grow old while I did not. I held her hand on the last night, when it was thin as paper, when she didn't even know my face anymore. His voice never rose. That was the terrible thing. It never once rose. I have had 3 centuries to grieve a woman who's been dust longer than your kingdom has stood, and it still hasn't stopped. Not for one single night. For one moment he wasn't a monster at the head of an army. He was just a man who had never put his dead to rest. I'm not your enemy, I'm your future. And I'm trying to spare you from it. No, Alaric said quietly. You're trying to make sure no one else gets the thing you lost. So your loss will mean something. So it won't just be a wound, it'll be a law. And Silas's colors flinched. A direct hit. Ren saw it land, enough, and the gentleness was gone. If you won't be saved, you'll be replaced. He raised one hand, and the purebloods attacked. Ren had never seen Alaric truly fight. He'd held back in training. Restrained, careful with his clumsy human student. But here in their dark, defending his home and his daughter and the woman he'd pulled off a midnight train, he became something else entirely, a blur of motion and absolute violence. Every strike precise, every movement economical and deadly. He was a king who had earned his throne across 300 years of blood, and in the dark, with his family behind him, you could finally see exactly how. But 20 against 1 was 20 against 1. Even for him, Ren saw him take a hit, then another. His colors flickered, pain threading through the gold, and she understood, with sudden, sick clarity, that he could not win this, not alone. So she put Posey down behind an overturned table, pressed the wooden stake into the child's tiny hands, and folded her own around them. Stay here. Stay low. I'll come back for you. I promise. Then she grabbed a short, silver blade from the wall, and she stepped into the dark. She couldn't see them coming, not with human eyes. The hall was black as a grave. But she didn't need her eyes. She had the colors. She watched a pureblood's poisoned green flare and surge a half-second before he lunged at Alaric's exposed back. And in that half-second, that impossible, borrowed half-second, Ren moved. Her blade found his side. Silver burned on contact. He screamed. Turned on her, fangs bared. Big mistake, because Alaric heard her. Heard the woman he loved in danger. And something inside him, something that had been holding back even now, simply snapped. The king became a force of nature. He tore through them, too fast to follow, protecting her with a ferocity that made even his own returning guards stop dead in the doorway. The purebloods broke, scattered, fled into the dark they'd come from. But she'd never been a fighter. And reading the future is not the same as having the body to answer it. She saw the second one coming, saw his colors flare a half-beat before he moved, and she knew exactly where the blow would land, and her tired human muscles simply couldn't get her out of the way in time. Knowing and doing are 2 different countries, and the border between them is the body. The strike caught her across the ribs. It was like being hit by a car. She left her feet entirely, hit the marble floor, slid, and felt something deep inside her give with a wrongness that wasn't pain yet. That was still just information. The pain politely waiting its turn. Then the pain arrived. White. Total. She couldn't get a breath. Couldn't make her lungs work. Just lay there on the cold stone with the dark roaring around her and the small silver blade 3 feet from her open hand. And from very far away she heard him. She heard Alaric scream her name. She'd never heard that sound from him before. Not the king's voice. Not the careful, controlled, 300-year-old voice. This was the other thing underneath all of it, the thing the centuries had been built to cover, torn open all at once. And the temperature of the whole fight changed, because up to that moment he had been a swordsman. Precise, economical, a professional doing terrible work well. But the instant she hit the ground, the professional was gone, and what was left was something older and worse. Something that had no interest in technique. He stopped fighting to win. He started killing to reach her. There is an enormous difference, and every creature in that hall felt it land. She got one elbow under herself, got half a breath. The pain when she moved was a living thing with teeth, but she made herself look up, because Posy was still behind the table, and she had promised. She had promised she'd come back. I'm okay. She gasped, to no one, to the child who couldn't hear her over the chaos. I'm okay, baby, I'm coming. She wasn't okay. But you say it anyway. You say it for them. And then Alaric was there, between her and the dark, and he had carved a circle of empty floor around them both, with a violence that had emptied that whole side of the hall. He dropped to one knee beside her without taking his eyes off the room. Where? He said. One word. His voice shaking. Ribs. She got it out through her teeth. Just ribs, I think. Go. I can go, I'll crawl to her, just go, no, flat. Absolute. I am not leaving you on the floor again. And she understood, even through the white roar of it, what he meant. Again. He had spent his whole long life leaving people on floors, in beds, in graves, watching them go down and not being able to stop it. And some line in him, 3 centuries old, had just been crossed for the last time. He got an arm under her, lifted her like she was made of paper, and carried her, through the worst of it, to the overturned table where his daughter waited. Set her down beside the child, with a gentleness that made no sense in the middle of all that blood, and then turned back to the dark with both his family at his back, and finished what the purebloods had started. And in minutes it was over, the hall destroyed. But standing Silas Dunmore alone remained, at the center of the ruin. Watching the two of them with those ancient grieving eyes, you see, he said softly. She bled for you. She'll always bleed for you. Until the day she's gone. And then you'll have 300 years to remember the color of it. He turned to leave, then stopped. This isn't over, Alaric. The old law was written in blood. It will only ever be changed the same way. He looked at Wren one last time, and something crossed his face she couldn't read. I'm sorry, girl, for what's coming. I truly am. And then he was gone, out into the night that had made him. Wren crossed the wrecked hall to where Alaric stood, breathing hard. Blood on his clothes. Are you hurt? Just scared? She lifted a shaking hand to his face. You were terrifying and amazing. And terrifying, he laughed. Actually laughed. A broken, exhausted sound. And then he pulled her against him and held her tight. The kind of tight that has nothing to do with strength and everything to do with the fear of letting go. Don't ever do that again, he said into her hair. Can't promise that. They come for you. I'm coming too. Even if I'm terrible at it, you're not terrible. He pulled back to look at her. You read his colors. Knew where he'd strike. You saved my life. Again, a small voice. From behind the overturned table. Is it over? They both turned. Posy stood there, stake still clutched in both hands, eyes huge in the dark, and when she saw them both standing, both alive, both reaching for her, her colors settled into yellow. She ran across the ruined hall and threw herself at the both of them, and they caught her together. Held on, tomorrow, Alaric said over the child's head, and his colors had hardened into something Wren had never seen in him. Resolve. Tomorrow I call the full council, and I end this. Not with swords. With law, how? By changing the one they hide behind. He looked at her, and the gold in him burned steady and sure. If they want to kill me for loving a human, fine. But first I am going to make it legal. For any of us. To love any of you. Can you even do that? I'm the king, he said. The question isn't whether I can, a grim ghost of a smile. It's whether they'll let me live long enough to finish. The full council convened at dawn, 70 of them. Representatives from every major family, every territory, every faction that had carved out a corner of the night across 300 years. They filled the grand chamber, a vast stone space reserved for only the gravest business. The kind that reshapes a world. Ren stood behind Alaric's throne, not because she had to, because he'd asked her to. He wanted them to see her, to look at the human and understand exactly what he was about to fight. For Posey sat beside him, in a smaller chair, a circlet too heavy for her small head. But her spine was straight, and her colors were a steady, determined gold she'd insisted on coming. "It's about our family," she'd said, the longest sentence she'd spoken in months. I should be there. No one had argued. The chamber fell silent as Alaric rose. "Members of the council," his voice carried to the farthest stone. "I come before you to propose a change to the old law. The law that governs how we may and may not love." A ripple moved through the chamber. He raised a hand. The room stilled. "For 5 centuries we have kept ourselves apart. Humans are food. Or servants. Never family. Never equals. This law was written to protect us from the agony of loving creatures who age and die in what feels, to us, like a single breath." A vampire in silver robes rose, his colors a genuine, troubled blue. "Lord Ashbourne. Speak. The separation protects them too, not malice. Honest grief. Humans who tangle their lives with ours tend to meet terrible ends. We've all seen it. Bury enough of them and you stop wanting to dig the graves." Alaric nodded, slow. "You're right." And the honesty of it landed harder than any argument, which is why my proposal includes protection. Any human who bonds with one of us would have legal standing, rights. The full shelter of our law. They could not be fed upon without consent, could not be discarded when they became inconvenient. They would stand as equals in our courts. And the aging? Another voice called. The dying? How do you protect them from that? You don't. The word dropped into the chamber like a stone into a still well. You don't, Alaric said again. Quieter. That is the cost. But it should be theirs to pay, not ours to forbid. If a human chooses to love one of us, knowing she'll grow old while we do not, knowing she'll leave us, that is her choice, her dignity, and we have no right, none. To make it for her, he paused. Looked back at Ren. She nodded, the smallest motion. Go on, I'll speak plainly. Ren Holloway came into my house in the autumn. In a single season, she has pulled my daughter back from a silence none of you could reach. She exposed a plot spell this very council into turning on me, and on the longest night of this year, she stood in the dark with a blade in her hand and bled. For us, for all of us, his colors blazed. She has done more for this kingdom in 1 season than some of you have done in a century, and she did it while being treated as something we could throw away when she'd outlived her use. That ends today. And then something happened that no one had planned. A young vampire stood, his colors a sudden trembling yellow, hope raw and terrified. I support this. My sister loves a human. She's hidden it for 40 years, terrified of exile, terrified of all of you. If this passes, she could finally stop being afraid. He sat down, and another rose. Then another. Stories spilled out of the dark, secret husbands, hidden wives. Children no one had been allowed to claim. An old woman rose. Lady Vale, her face a map of patience worn into stone. I had a husband, a human. We were married in secret for 60 years. I buried him under another man's name because I was not permitted to be his widow. I was not even allowed to grieve him out loud. She looked around the chamber. Vote yes. So the next one of us does not have to bury love like a crime. One after another they rose. A whole civilization that had been told, for 500 years, that the most human thing in them, the capacity to love something that would die, was a flaw to be cut out. And Ren, behind the throne, watched the reds of suspicion drain from the room. Watched gold bloom across the chamber like dawn coming up over a battlefield. A whole hidden world stepping into the light, because one tired waitress had fallen asleep on the right train. Lady Crow rose last. Her colors warred old grief against something newer. You would risk everything. For this one woman, for the principal, he corrected. But yes, for her too, a long silence. Then Lady Crow nodded. Once, put it to a vote. And that was when the doors of the chamber exploded inward. The purebloods came through the breach like a black tide. Silas Dunmore at their head, and behind him, not 20 this time. 40. You won't change it, Silas. Calm, terribly calm. 500 years of law, undone in a single morning. By a king who fell in love with his daughter's nanny, he shook his head, almost sad. The old ways will not die in a vote. They'll die over my dead body. Or yours, Silas. Alaric stepped down from the dais, putting himself between the invaders and his family. You don't have to do this. I do. Because if you're allowed to be happy, then my 300 years of grieving meant nothing. Then I built my whole life around a wound for no reason at all. His colors cracked. I cannot let that be true. Do you understand? I cannot. "It is true, Silas. Then I'll burn it down before I believe it." And he gave the signal. The purebloods attacked. It was carnage. 40 against a chamber of nobles, grown soft on centuries of peace. The hall became a storm of motion and screaming. Wren grabbed Posey, pulled her behind the great stone throne, pressed the child's face into her chest and her own back against the cold stone. Eyes closed, sweetheart. Hold on to me. And she watched the battle through the colors. She saw Alaric carve a path toward Silas, but she also saw what the others couldn't. Saw the purebloods peeling off, circling, converging on the one weak point in the king's defense. Her. The girl behind the throne, because Silas had understood the way only a man who'd lost everything could understand that you don't defeat a king by breaking his sword. You break his heart? Alaric, she screamed. They're coming for Posey. He turned, and in the half-second his eyes left Silas. Silas struck. A blow that should have taken his head. Alaric twisted barely, the strike opening a long wound across his shoulder instead. Black blood spraying across white marble. He went down to one knee, and 4 purebloods broke from the melee and came straight for the throne. She had a silver blade. She lifted it. She would die in front of this little girl before she let them past. But 4 against 1 human was not a fight. It was a formality, and then Alaric was there. He shouldn't have made it. The distance was too far, the wound too deep. But he crossed the hall in a single, impossible motion, and he did not raise his weapon. He spread his arms, and put his own body between his family and the 4 blades coming for them. Wren saw it happen in a single, frozen, terrible heartbeat. Saw the king of the Eastern Territories, the conqueror, the thing the old world feared, choose. Not the throne, not the kingdom, not 300 years of power, but to die. With his arms spread wide, over a human woman and a silent little girl, his colors in that instant were the purest she had ever seen. Not blue, not gold, white. The white of a man who has finally, after 3 centuries, found something worth more than his own immortality. The blades came down, and a sound tore through the chamber that stopped every soul in it cold. Don't. It was small, and high, and cracked with months of disuse, but it filled the entire hall. Posey, the silent child. The girl who had not raised her voice since they lowered her mother into the ground. She had pushed free of Wren's arms, and she was standing. In the open, tiny and furious and shaking, one small hand thrown out toward the men about to kill her father. "Don't hurt my daddy!" And the purebloods, hardened killers, everyone, flinched. They flinched at the voice of a child. It bought a half-second, only that. But a half-second was all Wren needed, because she had been reading Silas the whole time. And what she saw in the instant Posey screamed was the wall around his grief. "Cracking, Silas!" Wren shouted. "Look at her! Look at what you're about to take!" And Silas looked. He looked at the little girl, standing fearless over her wounded father, her small voice still ringing off the stone. And Wren watched it happen. Watched 300 years of grief. 300 years of telling himself that no one else deserved the love he'd lost shatter, because he saw it. He saw the man he'd been before, the one who'd held a frail hand on a last night, the one who had loved like that, like this. Like a king spreading his arms over a child, and he saw, with sudden unbearable clarity, that he had spent 3 centuries not honoring his love. But betraying it. "Stop," Silas said. The purebloods froze. "Lower your blades, louder now," cracked open. "Lock on them." And the blades came down, away from the throne. The hall fell into a silence so complete Wren could hear the black blood dripping from the king's shoulder onto the marble. Silas crossed the hall, slow, stopped before Alaric, who had risen, swaying, putting himself once more between Silas and his family. I knew a woman who screamed like that once, when she was small, when she was afraid. I had made myself forget the sound, because remembering it hurt too much to bear. He looked at Posey, at Wren, at the wounded king, and I told myself that pain was wisdom, that my grief made me right, a long, shuddering breath. It didn't. It only made me cruel. He stepped back. "You'll have your vote, Alaric. I won't stop it. Not anymore." He turned toward the broken doors. "Let them love. Let them lose. Let them grieve like I did. At least they'll have had the loving first. I never did. I just had the grief, and no one ever told me that was a choice." And then Silas Dunmore walked out of the chamber. His army followed, subdued, lost. Soldiers without a war, they put it to a vote. Right there, in the ruined chamber. With blood still on the marble, all in favor of amending the old law, to allow bonding between our kind and humankind. With full and equal protection for both, Wren watched the hands rise. She counted, her heart slamming. 48. Out of 70. Not all of them. Never all of them. But a clear and undeniable majority. The motion passes, the secretary said, and his voice broke, just slightly, as if he too had been hiding someone, somewhere, for a very long time. Half the chamber erupted in a sound Wren had never heard before. Not a cheer, a sob. A great, collective, breaking sob of relief. The sound of hundreds of years of held breath finally let go. In the days that followed, the mansion changed. Not its stone, the stone stayed ancient and severe, but its sound. Doors left open. Voices in the halls. The strange, glad chaos of a house that had decided to live. Lady Crow came to Wren once, in the garden. Stood a long time before she spoke. I told you that you saw magic, not just emotion. There are perhaps 3 living creatures in the world who can do that, none of them human. Until you, she studied Wren with those ancient eyes. The night you fell into his lap, child, the world tilted. I felt it. I just didn't know your name yet. And then she did something Wren never expected. She inclined her head. A small bow, the kind one ancient power gives another. Welcome to the night. Marin found her there as the light was failing. She would have liked you, the old woman said at last. Adeline. She would have liked you very much. It was, Wren understood, the kindest thing the woman knew how to say. I didn't believe her, you know. About the prophecy. I watched the trains because I'd promised, not because I had faith. And then he walked in that night with you asleep on his shoulder. And I understood I'd been wrong to doubt. Her eyes, for once, were wet. About a great many things. Then Alaric came out onto the balcony where the roses bloomed against all reason in the cold. And Posy was already there, between them, the way she always seemed to be now. Are you happy? He asked Wren. Quiet. As the sun climbed over the gardens, she looked at him, at the little girl, at the strange impossible, hard-won family they'd built out of 3 separate griefs in the space of a single season. I spent 3 years invisible, she said, working myself to nothing. Sure, I'd die without one single person knowing I was ever really here. Her eyes filled. She let them, and now I'm standing in the sunrise with the 2 people I'd give anything for. Asking me if I'm happy? She laughed. Wet and bright and free, that's the thing, she said. I don't get forever. One day I'll get old. One day I'll be gone. And you'll still be standing here, looking exactly like this. And you'd still choose it? Knowing how it ends? He lifted her hand to his lips. Every grief in this world is the price of a love. Silas spent 3 centuries paying for one he never let himself have. I'd rather pay for one. I did. His colors were steady. Sure, the truest thing she had ever seen. However few years it gives me. They'll be the only years that ever mattered. They bonded in the spring, not a wedding. Vampires had no word for wedding. They'd never had cause for one. So they made a new thing that morning, out of old pieces, the first bond in 500 years, to be entered into the law that Wren herself had made possible without ever once meaning to. It was held in the garden, where the roses had finally stopped blooming out of season and started blooming on time, as if the house itself had relaxed at last. And it was full. That was the thing Wren kept coming back to, in the years after, when she remembered it. It was full, because they came out of the dark for it. All the ones who'd stood up in the council chamber and said the unsayable. They came, and they brought the people they'd hidden for decades. Lady Vale came, and beside her, for the first time in public in 200 years, she let herself speak her dead husband's true name aloud, to a stranger, just to feel how it sounded in the open air. The young vampire came with his sister, and the sister came with the human she'd loved in secret. For 40 years, an old man now, stooped and white-haired, holding the hand of a woman who looked half his age and would outlive him by centuries, and neither of them, that day, had to pretend otherwise. They simply stood in the sun and were what they were, a whole hidden country come up for air at last. In a garden. Because one tired woman had fallen asleep on the right train, Posy was the one who joined their hands. She'd insisted, with the absolute authority of a 7-year-old who has recently rediscovered her own voice and intends to use all of it. She stood between them in a yellow dress. Yellow, always yellow now. The color she'd reclaimed first, and she took her father's cold hand and Wren's warm one and pressed them together between her own small palms. Now you're stuck, she informed them gravely. Both of you, with each other, and with me, a beat. Mostly with me, the whole garden laughed, and Wren. Looking down at the child who had once had no words at all and now had more opinions than the entire vampire council combined, felt her eyes go hot. Mostly with you, she agreed. Forever. And then she caught herself, because forever was the one word she didn't own. The word that had hung over every good thing in this house like a blade. She braced for the old sorrow to come. It didn't, because Posy, who saw colors now too, they'd discovered that over the winter, the gift passing through Adeline's line the way Lady Crow had hinted it might. Posy looked up at her with those bright dark eyes and said the thing that finally, completely set Wren free. "You don't have to do forever," the little girl said, with the easy certainty of a child explaining something obvious to a slow adult. "Mama didn't get forever either, but she got us, and then she sent you." A small shrug. "So forever's not the good part. The good part is getting picked." There was a silence in the garden then, of 300 immortals all at once feeling the floor of their long, careful lives shift underneath them. A human child of 7 had just said the thing that none of their 5 centuries of law had managed to say. That the length was never the point. The point was the choosing. Alaric pressed his lips to the top of his daughter's head. He couldn't speak. He didn't need to. His colors said all of it, blazing in the spring light, a sunrise with no night left in it at all. And Lady Crow, the oldest creature in that garden, who had argued against all of this in a stone room not 6 months before, lifted her glass and inclined her head to a waitress and a widow and a once silent little girl, and said, so quietly that only the front row heard it, "To the ones who get picked, down below, the city woke. Indifferent. Enormous. Carrying its millions of tired people through another ordinary day." Somewhere out there on a midnight train, another exhausted soul was leaning against a pole, certain that no one in all that vastness knew they were alive. But Wren Holloway knew different now. She knew that sometimes, on the worst night of your life, you fall backward into the dark. And the dark turns out to be warm, and a hand settles on your shoulder. And a voice you have never heard before says the one word you have been waiting your whole life to hear. Stay. The end.